Welcome, I'm David Allworth of Mudgee and part of the Watershed Landcare. I'd like to welcome you to Watershed Landcare's Grass Literacy series. Why grass literacy? Correct identification of plants is essential for anyone who has the responsibility or interest in managing vegetation and landscapes. You can't manage something if you don't know what it is. For example, many plants of the ecologically important native tree violet have been sprayed out because of their similarity to the noxious, spiny African boxthorn. In this series, we'll look at grasses, both native and exotic. From an agricultural viewpoint, some grasses are more productive than others. They differ when they grow, they differ in the places that they can be grown, and they differ very much in how they respond to particular management actions. For instance, Clare, which is the common red grass, occurs during the warmer months and it frosts very readily and hays off. Microlina, the weeping grass, behaves quite differently and can in fact be grazed quite low and is highly palatable in that stage, whereas our good friend the kangaroo grass, if you graze it low and continuously, you eradicate it out of the paddock. Number of grasses are important to know because they have particular stages in which they're toxic, for instance phalaris, Johnson's grass, perennial ryegrass, and annual ryegrass. Or you have grasses which, if they're let go to seed, the seed is injurious to livestock. For instance, Microlina is one of those, the local speargrass and barleygrass. And in fact, it was another speargrass in central Queensland that put a very quick end to the sheep industry in central Queensland because the seed got underneath the skin of the animals. There are also those grasses that are incredibly invasive, which you need to be able to spot early on so as that you can do some strategic control. From an environmental perspective, it is usually those that are required by law to be controlled and eradicated, or those that are highly invasive that are of major concern. Specifically, serrated tussock is possibly the most economically and environmentally significant grassweed in the Mid-Western Regional Council area. Several native grasses are similar in appearance, often growing in close proximity. For example, speargrass, poa tussock, snowgrass, or some wallaby grasses. Being able to identify a grass early on is pretty key to being able to keep it under control. The related Chilean needlegrass is also making inroads locally and is similar to speargrass, so being able to separate them is key. Couletai grass, which is a little bit to the west here of Mudgee, is highly invasive, but it's similar to barbed wire grass. So being able to know whether you're seeing barbed wire grass or couletai is very handy. Often these grasses are found on roadsides, and early identification is a great thing. By knowing what grasses you have under management, you can manipulate their composition and abundance by various means, such as strategic grazing, fire, herbicide, or the addition of fertiliser. Manage for the more desirable species, and the undesirable species will often decline. The following sessions will provide the skills to identify grasses, but first there's need to become familiar with the terminology used to name and describe various parts of the grass plant, as much as you need to know your ABC or your 1, 2, 3. And essentially what we're aiming to do is allow you to read these sort of field guides and understand what the terms mean. What we're doing here is we're getting into the details. Why do so many people back away from grasses? And one of the really common reasons is that the things that identify them are in fact quite small, hard to see, even with your glasses on. But fortunately, someone back a few centuries ago invented the hand lens. A rose is nice and big, you can see the flower. The flower of a grass is quite tiny, perhaps only a fraction the size of your fingernail, but it really is the key to knowing it. We need to understand some of the basic terms. For instance, you've picked up this grass, You see what it generally looks like. You dive into your book and you find something that looks pretty much like it. There are a couple of options, and one of them says, they read pretty much the same, and then one of them says, this one has an awn, that's the really bad one, and the okay one doesn't have awns. Awns, what are awns? Well, awns are just a little part which you probably more think of as the thing that spikes into your trousers or your socks. So there's some terminology to get used to. These books that describe grasses are out of the science of botany. The science of botany has been around for many years. In fact, one of the reasons that actually it came about was that the early chemists wanted to talk to each other about plants that were useful for medicine. And if they couldn't describe them accurately, you could end up with the wrong plant. For instance, the fennel looks a bit like the hemlock. So it's pretty important to be able to identify things and be up with the terms. What we'll be doing is using not high science equipment, your hand lens. We'll use a cardboard cutout, which is the various grass parts, which you can then cut out and get used to what the various terms relate to, because that will help when you use your hand lens for understanding which part's being talked about. We'll also have techniques and show you, here you are, you're handling this piece of grass and you want to be flipping over the pages and you want to be using your hand lens at the same time. Little trick, put that on a piece of Blu Tack, then you can look at it, and you need to separate a grass sometimes. Another trick is a wine cork and a little pin put into it. So these are all the things that we'll cover. And what we'll be generally doing is introducing you to the term, showing you where it is on the grass, and making it large and easy to understand and see when you've got your hand lens.